Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Hear Our Voices. We have a special guest today. Her name is Ali, and she's going to tell you her story about her experience. So we're just going to dive right into it. So, can you tell us a little bit how you got into shelter?
Okay, hi everybody, I'm Allie. So the way it started out was we were living in an apartment in New York City, owned by NYCHA. Our apartment was uninhabitable. There were several issues, and the final straw for us, which is what led us to leave, is that our bedroom ceiling actually collapsed on top of me and my son Jay in the middle of the night, and we did not receive any emergency services from the housing authority or from any other emergency services until we were notified by a friend of mine to go to PATH, and then I was entered into shelter.
Oh my gosh, that
Yeah.
is so scary. I'm sorry that happened to you. Oh
Yeah,
my
it was very
gosh.
scary. What was worse was that nobody was assisting us. The landlord didn't seem to care. Nobody who was involved with night chest seemed to care or be able to help. It was just a complete nightmare.
Did you end up doing something about it after, or you just let it slide?
No, we have a pending lawsuit. There's a lot, to it because when we first entered into the shelter, we technically were not considered to be quote unquote homeless
Yeah.
because we did technically have that apartment. And so even the shelter did not want to give us services. They were trying to make us go back to our apartment. They're saying to us, well, you're not
Wow.
homeless. You need to go back home. You have an apartment. You're not homeless. And I'm saying, well, listen, this apartment is uninhabitable. This is a dangerous situation. Nobody in their right mind would go back to a place where they don't feel safe, where they feel like, the ceiling could collapse again. And
Yeah.
even when the carpenter came, at this time, I was not staying there anymore. I mean, I still had possession of the apartment for about 9 months. So the 9 months that I was in the shelter, I technically still had access to my apartment. Nobody told me to leave. I left on my own because I didn't feel it was safe there. And there
Right.
was a big hole in my ceiling, and everything in our bedroom was completely destroyed. Our beds, our clothing, like there was not like we could just go back there and just go back to sleep like nothing happened.
Oh my
So
gosh.
yeah, so it was a whole thing, and even the shelter staff and the people there who's supposed to help you were just like, basically, you need to leave because you're not homeless. And so it was definitely a struggle trying to get services and trying to um basically trying to just get people to acknowledge like where you're standing, in that kind of situation. Like, it's I don't think anybody in their right mind would say, okay, whatever, I'm just gonna go back home. I'll wait for them to come fix it, and then I'll just like nothing happened.
NYCHA is a piece of work because I live in NYCHA now, and
Yeah.
I grew up in Queens in like a regular house. Never grew up in like no buildings or anything, so I don't know how it is. But the water last night literally came off. I came home and the water was off. I'm like, again. I literally, because I've been here since 2008. The water has gone off every year since I've been here, a couple of times a year, right? So I make
Yeah.
sure I have like an emergency bottle just in case I come home and have to wash my hands or do something. Who has to live like that?
Ex-
Who shouldn't have to live
exactly.
like
It's
that?
it's ridiculous that you need to have like these emergency steps in place for not knowing what's going to happen, when at the very least they could inform you, okay, we're going to be doing some kind of services or something, the water's going to be off. Sometimes they do let you know, but sometimes they don't, and it's like,
Yeah.
it's not fair, it's not right. And that's just one small snippet of the kind of stuff that NYCHA does, and they just don't seem to care. They don't seem to think that these things matter, and they do matter. They're very important. People's health, people's lives, people's mental health is affected by these things that they overlook.
Right. It's so true. Like I'm just not used to the environment, what they give.
Yeah,
It's so
nobody is. I don't think anybody can get used to it.
I think some people who like they grew up here generations, I think they get used to it because it's all they know. When you're a person who
Yeah,
moves in from outside and comes in, you're like, this is not right. I think that's what it is.
yeah,
That's what it seems to me. Because people have been here, like I know people on my floor or whatever, who's been there all their life and they used to this, how this life is going, because their mother is here, their grandmother is here, their auntie live on a different floor. Like, there's a whole
yeah,
generation of people living in the system. They don't even realize like people shouldn't be living like cats and dogs like in
exactly.
apartments. You shouldn't be treated like that. You should have heat. I had to buy a heater this year because only one is either I have no heat or only one, I have one bedroom apartment. It's either the bathroom only has heat and it can't heat up the whole apartment, or my daughters
Yeah,
don't have heat. That's usually the
Or
two places in my
sometimes
apartments.
there's too much heat when it's hot out, when you don't even need the heat to be on.
Exactly.
They'll have the heat on until like May, and it'll be like 70 degrees out, and then they have the heat on. It doesn't make any sense.
It's, I don't know. Something is
Yeah.
just definitely broken in the system. I don't know why they just can't fix it. I feel like it's an easy fix. It's just, I just don't know. I really don't know what
Yeah,
the problem with
I
them.
know.
It's out of
Nobody
control.
could nobody seems to be able to figure it out because there's just ongoing issues with everything that they have going on.
Right. So I made sure I got a water like dispenser because I was like, I don't know where I gotta cut my water, and I used to boil water before, or just buy
Yeah.
bottled water. I just got a dispenser. I was like, you could deliver the water to my house every
Yeah.
month, and I know that I have drinking water at least. Like if I don't have regular
Yeah.
running water, I at least have drinking water because you need water. It's like
Yeah.
you don't know how long it's gonna be out.
And
And
that's another thing. And another thing, like feeling like you have to purchase water. Why do we have to purchase water? Like it doesn't make any sense. We're supposed to be having access to clean drinking water, and you
right,
don't even feel comfortable enough to drink your water because because you think it may not be clean enough or other issues. That's not right either. Why should we have to pay for water? I don't understand it because we have to do that too. When I was living there, I paid for, although I felt that my water was clean enough, I still had like several filters, and I had a zero filter, which is supposed to be very good. But
yeah,
even then, so we buy water because we just don't feel comfortable drinking tap water.
yeah. Honestly, I grew up not drinking tap water out the faucets like that, and I grew up in my
Yeah.
neighborhood. Like I grew up in Queens and Laurelton, and they have good water. But my family's from Jamaica. We are just normally boiling our water anyway. We feel like it kills
Yeah.
out enough, the bacteria and stuff. So I
Yeah.
grew up like that, or just drinking bottled water. So I don't. I mind
Yeah.
buying because it's a cost. It's like $20 something a month. But
Yeah.
make sure my water is hopefully good for me to drink. I
Yeah.
just buy it and keep it
Same with us.
hassle. I used
Yeah,
to have a
same thing.
filter too when I moved in. It was a lot.
Yeah. We grew up too with like boiling water or buying water. It was never a thing for us to drink tap water. And even still, when I see people doing it, I find it to be odd. I just don't understand how people are just totally fine with it. Like,
Yeah.
and especially within certain places like NYCHA, but even like within the shelter, I absolutely would not have been drinking that water because that building was so old and there were constant plumbing issues. There's just no way I could trust the water.
Right, definitely. So as you said, let's get into the nitty-gritty why we're really here, right?
Yes.
So can you tell me the process of when you got into the path? How did you hear about it, and why did you pick this particular way to get into shelter?
Okay, so initially when the bedroom ceiling collapsed, this happened on a winter morning. It was like 2 o'clock in the morning. So
Mhm.
when it happened, we were obviously in bed sleeping. It was a weekday, it was a Tuesday, and my son had school the next day, and I don't remember what I had to do, but I had regular things I had to do on that day. And when it happened, we were greeted by a NYCHA worker at the emergency room, right? When we got there, he informed us that he'd contacted Red Cross and that they were going to come to the apartment to assess the damages and then put us in an emergency hotel. And then from there, that we would discuss with the landlord from that particular building, because this was, even though it was owned by NYCHA, it was, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it was something that they had purchased and then became a NYCHA property. It wasn't like a big project buildings like you usually see. It was like a
Okay.
small building that they took on, and as I understand, they renovated it and then they took it on as their own. But it wasn't initially, as I understand. I maybe this is what I've heard from some neighbors. I don't know if it's 100% true or not. I just know it's not the big giant buildings that you normally see.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, when we contacted the Red Cross, they had no record of being contacted. They had no record of any of the information that I was telling them about my ceiling, this and that. So for 2 days, from the time, so we went to emergency, we went through all that. So after that, I'm contacting the landlord. What am I supposed to do? Where am I supposed to go? He goes, I said, I have no beds to sleep in. My beds are completely. Then he tells me, he told me, you can buy a mattress and request a reimbursement,
What?
is what he told me. Yeah, he said you can
Oh
buy a
my God.
mattress and request like I was just gonna buy a mattress and just put it in that bedroom under this big giant hole,
Right.
under this giant hole above my head, and just like nothing happened. Like I couldn't believe it. So we received absolutely no help, no assistance from NYCHA. Anyway, so then when like after that happened, I didn't know where to go, where to stay. So I stood with my sister for a couple of days. I got a few clothing items, and she lives in Harlem River Houses, which I understand like maybe one of the older projects in New York City. So
Yeah.
there are a lot of issues with her apartment too. And from that very first night of me staying in her apartment, I already had post-traumatic stress disorder that
Oh,
same night. That same night, I was already experiencing PTSD. Her heater, like you were mentioning about heater issues, would make these loud noises,
yeah.
and the banging of the I know it's unbelievable. It sounds like someone is doing it, like someone is like taking
I
a
know what you
hammer,
mean.
and but it's just like a normal noise apparently, and it would just bang so loud. Sometimes it would be such a strong bang that you would actually feel some vibration from it.
Oh, wow.
So I stood at her place for a couple of nights, you know, while going back and forth, calling different people, talking to different agencies, you know, trying to get some kind of help, some kind of assistance, trying to get at least an expedited transfer, you know, from my apartment to, because we were already trying to get a transfer for several months before this even happened, because I was due for a 2-bedroom. I only had a 1-bedroom at the time, but they were
I'm
also,
sorry. Can I stop you for a minute? How
okay.
old? You have a son, right?
He was 9 at the time.
And they gave you 1 bedroom?
Well, when we first moved there, he was a baby and I had a 1-bedroom, and then I was due for a transfer after he was 5, and since then I had been trying to get a transfer, but you know, apparently there was this new thing that they don't have to give you a transfer unless it's an emergency, like they don't have to expedite it. I don't know if that's true or not, but they were like not trying to give me a transfer. They were, sometimes they even refused to even give me the paperwork. They finally did shortly after this incident actually happened. Like, or I think it was it after or before, but it was like around that time. So like they only finally gave it to me, you know, later when my son was 9, when I think, if I'm not mistaken, you can get a transfer when your child is 5. Like if you have an opposite sex child from you, then you can get another room.
That's so. I was told so much different information. I
Exactly. So that's why when I keep saying like I'm not sure, because
No,
it's there's a lot of
I know you're saying, but it's weird
yeah,
to me that you got a 1 bedroom and you have a son. They told me when I moved in, because my daughter is a girl, that
yeah.
I could only get a 1 bedroom apartment until she's 6. So they told me if I had a boy, I would have got a 2 bedroom apartment. I was there lying to everybody. We don't know
So
the
that
right rules. They
so
told
yeah,
Wow.
so maybe maybe I was supposed to have a 2-bedroom already, but I didn't. I don't know why. But anyway, so then moving on, so we so I'm with my sister. I've already have PTSD at that point. Didn't know where to go. I'm calling people. I'm going to the state be able to help. You know, I'm going back and forth to different court places and trying to get some sort of legal assistance. And then my friend, a random friend who hadn't called me in a while, calls me. She's like, "Hey, how you doing?" This and that. And I told her, "You're not gonna believe what happened. A couple of days ago, my bedroom ceiling collapsed on me. I've been saying my sister the past few days. I don't know what to do." She goes, "Oh my God." She goes, "You got to go to PATH." I'm like, "What's PATH?" And I don't know I don't know what that acronym stands for, PATH, if it is an acronym for something else, but it's basically a place where you go if you're homeless or if you're experiencing homelessness, and they help you in placing you into a more it would be a temporary shelter, but then the shelter itself would assist you with getting permanent housing, as I understand. So I went to PATH. I went there, and it's like when you go there, it's just like you just feel horrible being there because everybody looks distressed. The staff, you know, like the
Right.
security and the staff, they're not friendly. They look through your bags and they kind of almost treat you like it almost feels like you're going into jail or something, into
Right.
some sort of prison, and they take things away from you that you're not allowed to have. Whatever, it could be any random thing, like a little bottle opener on your keychain or something like that. They'll take from you. So and then also you can't bring your pets. So I also had a dog at the time, which I had no idea what to do. Thank goodness my friend offered to take him with her to Long Island, and my rabbit too, which I had at the time as well. So anyway, we go there, we finally get help from PATH, and they place us in a family residence, which is on the Upper West Side. And then when we got there, it was like the start of another nightmare.
Right.
Yeah.
If you could change one of the process through the whole ordeal, what would you change about the process?
Oh my gosh. One thing.
All right, I'll give you
Um,
two things. Two things.
I just think that, well, first of all, the path, like from the very beginning, when you get into PATH, I told you, it's like going into prison. There's security scanners there. There are like these machines, you know, when you put like in the airport that you put your
Yeah.
bags. Um, I understand they want to keep everybody safe, but when you're thinking about it, these people who are going there, most of them are fleeing for their lives, from domestic violence, or something happened, in their apartment, like in my case, where the bedroom ceiling collapsed, or they couldn't pay their rent because maybe they lost their job, and then it caused a domino effect where they, weren't able to keep up with rent. Everybody's there for a different reason. But the bottom line is that everybody's there because they just had a traumatic experience happen to them,
Right.
you know, and it's affecting their lives. It's affecting the lives of their families. And it doesn't seem like the staff or the security or any of the people who are working in these jobs are acknowledging that. Like they're just treating you like you're just like you've done something wrong. Like, like
Right.
you've done something wrong, and now you're coming begging for help after you've done something wrong. That's the way it feels. And it's just like, it's bizarre because they have no compassion, they have no empathy, they don't seem to care at all about helping other people. It just seems like they're just there because it's just their job. And I know that these kinds of jobs can get stressful and they can be very draining, but this is kind of the time when you got to just put on a smile and say, Hi, I hope you're doing well, welcome, and we're here to help, and just let people know that you are there to help them, that you want to help them, and that they're going to receive the services they need, and they're not going to be judged as if they've done something wrong, as if they deserve, to be there.
Right. I know what you mean. I definitely know
So
what you
that's like
mean.
the main thing, like, honestly, and not just within the path, but then when you go onto the shelter as well, it's the same kind of demeanor with the workers. Like, they just they're rude, they're disrespectful, they treat you like you're a piece of garbage. Like, it feels like you're in prison and they're the wardens, is what it feels like.
It does. It does definitely feel like that. And it's sad. Did your shelter have metal detectors too? Or it was just like you get to
No,
walk in and be free?
it was a family residence, so they did not have metal detectors. They did not check us when we came in. However, they did do room checks. So they would check our rooms for whatever, we weren't there were a lot of things we weren't allowed to have. So but still, even though they didn't check us when we came in, there was always security there in the front, a lot of security, and it just always felt like you're just walking into a jail. The door would be locked, the front door, so you'd have to get buzzed in, and sometimes they would be chit-chatting among each other, amongst themselves, so then you would have to wait in order for them to buzz you in if they weren't, like, paying attention to the door that you were there, and sometimes if you came at night, because that neighborhood, there happened to be a lot of, like, there were some other characters in the neighborhood that weren't, probably people you wanna encounter in the night, so sometimes if we came in, like, late, not even that late, we would
Yeah.
have to stand outside and sometimes deal with harassment from people in the neighborhood before we were buzzed in. That would happen once in a while.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Of all the shelters in New York don't have metal detectors, but some of them do. I went to four, and the last one I was in had them. So I had to do it every single day with my daughter. It's ridiculous. I
Wow.
understand how you feel. But I was used to it a little bit just because I went to a high school what had it. So I was used to
Yeah.
doing it for 4 years in high school, then coming over. It's so
Yeah.
sad that we have to go through these things that really
Hmm.
it's horrible. You always feel
Yeah.
like you fail, people watching you.
Children shouldn't have to deal with this kind of stuff. They're children, they're innocent. They should not be treated as if they're criminals, Come on, a
Yeah,
5-year-old, a 6, 7-year-old, 9-year-old child, like, why should they be walking through metal detectors? It's just not
right,
right. It's putting this thing in their mind that, that they gotta, like, make sure that people view them as being good, as doing what's right, as, because maybe they feel people are viewing them that maybe they're not good and they need to prove themselves that they are, it's not right.
right. So tell me, how was it with you and the workers, and how was your room at the shelter when you finally got there? How did they greet you? How was the intake process for you? Did they explain everything to you? Things like that.
So yeah, they did a little when we first got in. It was late when we got in. When we were in path, they told us that we were waiting for a van to come pick us up and take us. And it was already like 9 o'clock at this point. And I'm like, so when is this van? And they couldn't tell me anything. They couldn't tell me what
Right,
time. They couldn't tell me how many hours. I'm like, well, it's 9 o'clock now. The guy's like, it could be a couple of hours. I'm like, a couple of hours. Path is in the South Bronx area, right?
right,
And this shelter that we were assigned to was on the Upper West Side. And I'm sitting up there, I'm like, well, I can get there in 30 minutes, you know, and I'm just like, I'm not gonna wait. And I asked, I said, well, can I just go there on my own? Because I'm tired, you know, like I don't want to wait for I was exhausted. I had an exhausting week, you know, I didn't want to wait for some van to come and who knows when, you know, by the time it shows up, it could have been 2 hours past when I could have been there already, you know. So they said it
Yeah.
was fine that I could go. So they gave me my paperwork. I went to the shelter myself. I got there around maybe nine something.
Hold
We got
on.
in.
Before you go on, did they give you the Metro cards?
Don't remember. They may have. I don't remember that.
Okay.
It,
Because they're
yeah,
supposed to give you Metro cards if you're leaving by yourself. But continues.
yeah. So yeah, I don't remember. So I just know that I did finally arrive. It was hard to find the address, but I found it eventually. So when we got there, the person who was supposed to actually do this intake went. She left like for a break. So then we were kind of waiting and waiting. And then finally some other lady who's just a regular security guard, she's not like the supervisor, she went and took us upstairs and she did everything with us. She took us and she showed us, you know, the refrigerator and everything was okay. It was a very, very tiny room with a bunk bed. It has a kitchenette, which is basically two burners with one little small sink, and it has its own private little bathroom, regular little bathroom, and a regular size fridge. There was no dresser. There was a little round table with two chairs. There was a closet in the room, a small closet that was like, you know, in the room, because apparently this was an old hotel that had been converted into a homeless shelter.
Yeah.
So we didn't have a dresser. So we go there, you know, we finally get settled in. And then a few days later, I realized that the stove, when you turn it on, it starts to smell very strongly like gas. So strong that the smell actually had gone out into the hallway, and we were told not to use the stove because of this reason.
Wow.
Right. And yeah, so then we're like, okay, well, if we can't use the stove, we're not allowed to have a microwave. They did have food downstairs, but my son and I were vegan, and we're more vegan at the time. And we didn't really eat that food. We ate some of it. Sometimes we try to pick, like if there were some vegetables, we just try to eat some parts of the dish that was available because they had frozen meals downstairs and a microwave. And we were also told that there was a washer machine or laundry area in the shelter, which was not true. And we were also told that there was a media area where you could use a computer if you needed, which was also not true. Um, so we weren't told by the shelter staff. We were told by Path. On the information that Path gave us, the paperwork, it stated that information on the paperwork. So yeah, so I would ask for a dresser. We never ever got one. They eventually brought in something, but it wasn't a dresser. What it was is like those little tiny dresser things you have at the end of your bed that has two little
On
drawers,
nightstand.
like a
Yeah.
little nightstand. And they brought something like that, and it was small and it had three little like small drawers, and it was not a dresser. Like that's not a dresser. That's like a little junk drawer, you know, that's not something where you're
Yeah.
actually. So we never got a dresser the whole time that we were there. We constantly mentioned about the stove not working. That kept coming up as if it could be fixed. The super from the building told me, well, you know, it's an old building. I don't know what to tell you, mama. And then he
Wow.
goes, and then yeah, and then he goes, we're gonna be moving, taking all of these out and putting in new stuff, but it's gonna take time. I'm like, well, none of this information helps me like at all. So
Exactly.
we had to get like a letter from the case manager or our caseworker to sent to the HRA so that they could give us like extra benefits because we had to buy outside food because we weren't able to cook indoors. You know, and of course a lot of people broke the rules, and they had little ovens, and they had little microwaves, and they had little stoves too sometimes, because I think other people also had those issues, and some people weren't allowed to use the stove because they didn't actually some people didn't have a stove in their room because some people didn't have gas, like some lines were on a gas line. I don't know, there was some confusion. At some point they even told my son and I that we weren't able to use the food in the downstairs because that food is only for people who don't have stoves. And I'm saying to them, well, everybody's aware that my stove doesn't work. I've made several complaint tickets. Everybody knows that. And now all of a sudden you guys are saying this, like, you know, so it was always like, there was always like
Something.
some sort of battle with them. Yeah, like about everything. There were several times where my refrigerator will also stop working, especially in the summer months, because I guess the humidity, I don't know, but sometimes it would stop and sometimes it would start working again. It was just crazy. I told this to them at least 3 different times. They never changed my refrigerator. They never even came to look at my refrigerator. So there were just ongoing things. Thank goodness we never had a rodent issue or anything like with roaches or anything like that. But other people complained a lot that they had mice, and then eventually we got a cat, so that was definitely going to deter any mice. And that was an issue at some point. At some point, they lied and they said that I had two black cats. I said, no, I only have one gray cat, which you guys know about. And the guy's like, no, you hit him. And I'm just like, wait, why would I hide him? Why would I lie? I know you guys can come into my room at any point. Like, it was just this constant, like, weird situation with them. And then at some point, I went down to see my caseworker. She was a new worker because I had a different worker, and then my worker also changed like 3 or 4 times that I was there. So that was very annoying too, always having to have a new worker. So this one worker, the last one, she actually, one day I went and I asked her, I told her I needed a residency letter. I believe I needed it for HRA because you need to constantly bring proof of like your address. And when I asked her for it, she told me, she said, oh, it's cute that you come to me when you need something. It's cute. Like I was a puppy or something. Like, I'm thinking, wait a minute, she's my worker. Isn't that what I'm supposed to go to her for? Like,
Exactly.
something. And I just couldn't believe that of how rude and disrespectful she was. And so then I went to her manager and I told him, I said, I'm never going to interact with her again. So she better not ever speak to me. I don't have to interact with her if I don't want to, and I'm not going to. And then from then on, I only, every time I had some sort of issue or whatever, or meetings, it was always with him. I never interacted with her. That's the kind of thing that I'm talking about, like that sort of behavior, that sort of commentary. Why say something like that? When in what context would you ever have to talk to somebody like that?
Exactly.
And so, especially a person who you are supposed to be helping, that is her job to help me, to help me with documents that I may need. And if I come to a person who's supposed to help me asking for help, well, I don't understand how they think that it's okay to say, oh, it's real cute. Like it was as if she'd taken it personally, that there were a few times that we had a meeting and I had missed it because I either had a doctor's appointment or I had physical therapy, but she like took it personally. Like, no, it's not a personal thing. Like, first of all, you work with me, your job is to help me with whatever I need help with in terms of like this situation that I'm in. So nothing is personal. Why are you taking it personally? And that's what it felt like. It felt like she had taken that person. She goes, oh, it's cute that you come to me for help. I was like, I couldn't even believe that. I was like, what? Like, so that was the kind of demeanor and the kind of behavior that a lot of people there, that's just kind of what they did. Like, the security was like that, like just like rude, disrespectful, like very like condescending. Other staff members were like that too. And then they would also try to almost make people feel like when they came to like housing, like actually trying to find housing, they would want to push, because they want to get people out. I understand that's their job, they want to do their job, but it felt like they were trying to push people into situations they didn't want to be in. Like, they were trying to force everybody to sign up for NYCHA, which some people don't want. And I especially didn't want it because obviously I just come from there and it was a nightmare and I wasn't going to go back to that. I wasn't going to go back to any NYCHA building because it wasn't just my building. That's an ongoing thing throughout the New York City Housing Authority, that their buildings are falling apart, they're not keeping up with maintenance, and this is just an ongoing thing. So I'm not going to go back to that kind of life, to have to worry again about what's going to happen next, what's going to fall next or what's going to break next. So I didn't want that. But when you don't want certain things, they try to make you feel as if you don't want to leave the shelter bad enough. It's like, listen, I want to leave the shelter, but I'm not trying to go back into the situation I was in before and then end up in a shelter again, or end up hurt, or God forbid, something else, if something else happens and I don't want to go live in a neighborhood that I don't want to live in. Bottom line, you ain't gonna go somewhere and then the first thing you're thinking is, oh, when am I gonna get out of here? I can't wait to get out. You want to go,
Yeah.
especially after shelter, you want to go somewhere where you can at least stay for a while, and
Right.
relax, settle down for a while. The first thing you're not gonna be thinking is, oh, when am I gotta move, I gotta get out of here.
Yeah,
you
that's what
know
I'm doing.
that's
I
not
know.
like, that shouldn't be your first thought. Your first thought should be, I get to relax, I get to get settled in later, and then maybe in a few years, if I want to move, I'll consider it then. But like, who's gonna want to move right away? I mean, at least that's not what I would want, and I really don't
Yeah.
think that people would want that, especially after being in a shelter for 3 years, and then who knows how long, being in whatever situation led them to being in a shelter,
Right. Understandable. Understandable. How long were you in the shelter?
I was there for nearly 3 years.
3 years. Okay.
Yeah, nearly.
That's a long time because the average
It
family, they say, stay over a year. So in the same shelter, or did you go to different shelters?
Uh, Fortunately, we were able to remain in the same shelter. I knew of other families there that some of them had been there for 5 years or 6 years, and
Oh
I'm like,
my
how is this?
God.
Like, there are families that when I got there, they were already there before me, and when I left, they were still there, and they're still there basically now. And I don't
That's
understand how is it
crazy.
that, I mean, everybody has a different situation, but I don't get
Yeah.
that. I don't understand what's going on, how they're working these things out, how they're deciding who gets, to move. Like, I don't know, understand how they're allocating these resources. I
Yeah.
don't know.
That's crazy. I
Yeah,
could say for sure, I know people who work with like who work with some people in the shelter. Some families want to stay there long enough to actually save up money, and because
yeah,
it's cheaper by staying in a shelter. But to me, I
yeah,
feel like I would want my own space and my own spot, and
yeah,
I have to be under, like, I feel like somebody's eye, their thumb. It's like, yep,
yeah,
you can't move like yourself because it's
yeah.
restricting you on how you can live your life. It's kind of
It really
scary.
is. It really is. It's basically like what it felt like being in a shelter. It felt like my life was on pause. It felt like a piece of my life and my son's life was taken away from me for that time because we were not able to do many things. I mean, I tried my best to keep things normal for him, to keep him entertained, to do fun things with him as much as I could, um, to my abilities, but it still did affect us. It still affected the things that we would do. We couldn't stay out like overnight. Like, you could stay
Right.
out, I think, for no more than 48 hours. Um, and if you did want to stay out longer, you needed a special pass, you needed special permission, they needed to know where you were going, they wanted an address, they wanted all this stuff. And I'm like, well, what's the problem if you're going to stay out for, let's say, 1 week, right? One time. They said, well, if you can stay somewhere for a week, that means you're not homeless. It's like, just because you could
Yeah.
stay somewhere, like, even if, let's say, your family had some sort of event and you went to stay with your family for 1 week, that doesn't mean you can live with your family. That doesn't mean that they're going
Exactly.
to allow you to live with them. So for them to say, oh, well, if you could stay somewhere for a week, that means that you could live there if you needed to. That's completely irrational to even say that, and untrue. And they know that. They know that that is completely um untrue, and unreasonable to say something like that, because everybody knows that you can't just because someone's willing to let you stay in their place for a couple of days or even up to a week or so, or even a couple weeks, doesn't mean that they're going to be okay with you staying there or are able to host you for, a year plus, you and your child or your children.
Right.
So for them to kind of like make those kinds of assumptions and say those kinds of things like, oh, well, if you can stay somewhere for whatever amount of time, then that means you don't need to be in the shelter. So they'll literally kick you out. They will. What they will do if you stay out for more than 2 days, they will log you out.
That was Allie's story. Guys, please come back next week to hear the rest of her story. It's really interesting, really juicy, as you can hear. Guys, if you don't know, we have a new Twitter page, HOV NYC at Twitter. We also have an Instagram, but everything will be definitely in the description box down below if I quoted anything wrong. Thank you for coming out. Thank you for listening to us. Later.